My husband suddenly asked me for 50,000 rupees, and I stared at him in disbelief. I couldn't understand why Fahad would need such a large sum, especially at a time like this. His entire belongings were already packed, and he was about to leave the house. He had money for his expenses and even had the ticket in his hand. So why the sudden request for 50,000 rupees? This raised a suspicion in me. I said, "You probably want to return money to your mother and sisters? Maybe your mom told you to give 50,000 to her before leaving, but I'm not giving you any money. The money you give me for expenses, I save and manage it. How long will you stay abroad? One day you'll have to come back. That's why I think about the future. You've already spent a lot on your mother and sisters." Without letting my husband finish, I told him straight up, "I won't give you a single rupee." I was furious because my sister-in-law often played these tricks. She would somehow fool my husband into handing over money. And my husband, who works so hard in a foreign country, would waste his earnings on her unnecessary desires. Now, as our children were growing, we needed money too. But who understood that? That's why I had firmly refused to give him the money. After hearing this, Fahad put his head in his hands, saying, "You think you know everything, but you turn a simple matter into a whole drama. The 50,000 isn't for someone else. It's for me. When I get there, I'll transfer it back to you. Think of it as a business deal." I was stunned when I heard my husband, who worked as a driver in a large mansion in Saudi Arabia, mention business. I asked, "What business have you started in Saudi? You can barely do anything other than drive. Surely you've been tricked into investing money by someone else." I didn't trust my husband at all because he was a straightforward man who could easily be deceived by anyone. If it weren't for my older brother, who had gotten him the job in Saudi Arabia, my husband might have spent his entire life struggling, with nothing to show for it. And on top of that, his mother and sisters always tried to take advantage of us. Fahad replied, "Mariam, you make mountains out of molehills. Let me finish first. You've already made up your mind to prove me wrong. Yes, I'm a decent man, but that doesn't mean I'm stupid. Whatever I do it with thought. The 50,000 you give me, I will buy pine nuts with it. My boss has asked for them. When I get there and give him the pine nuts, he'll pay me, and I'll transfer the money to your account immediately. Keep it for the children's future." My husband was clearly upset, but my mind was still fixed on one thought. I said, "Pine nuts worth 50,000 rupees? Either you're trying to fool me, or your boss is planning to have you smuggle something for him. And in return, he'll send you to jail." "Whatever came to my mind," I said. Fahad sat down, holding his head in frustration. Angrily, he said, "You're educated, but your brains are in your knees. I'm telling you, I need to buy the pine nuts and take them with me." "Then where did the talk of smuggling come from? If you're giving 50,000 rupees, fine. Otherwise, I'll borrow from a friend. It's pointless to talk to you. You peel away the skin of every issue, but still, you never understand." My husband, Fahad, now visibly angry, stood up. I said, "Okay, wait, I'll give it, but tell me one thing. Why does your boss need so many pine nuts?" This time, Fahad gave me a sharp look and replied, "I didn't ask him why he needs pine nuts. His call came and he asked me to bring something. How could I refuse? He's my boss. That's why I agreed." Maybe I made a mistake. I forgot that you have a habit of questioning everything. I should have known. Silently, I took out the money and handed it to Fahad, keeping quiet. I told myself, "Mariam, don't ask your husband any more questions. His mood is already sour, and it won't be good if it worsens. He will return after 2 years anyway, so let it go." But what could I do? It was in my nature. A little while later, when my husband returned after buying the pine nuts and asked me to unpack his luggage again, I snapped. In frustration, I said, "If you wanted to unpack, why did you pack it in the first place? All my hard work went to waste. I spent the entire day packing everything with so much effort." Fahad replied, "Mariam, are you out of your mind? You're allowed to carry a certain amount of luggage. My bag is already over 20 kilos, and if I add these pine nuts, the weight will increase. So reduce some of my stuff and fit these nuts into my bag. I don't even know if customs will let them through, and I don't want any trouble." I noticed a bit of worry on Fahad's face as the pine nuts weighed almost 4 kilos and were taking up quite a bit of space. I reopened his suitcase, removed some of his old clothes, and squeezed the pine nuts inside. When I was done, Fahad seemed relieved and said, "Don't worry about the money. As soon as I get there, I'll get the money from my boss and send it to you." This time I didn't say anything. Soon our house was filled with relatives who had come to say goodbye to Fahad before he left. We all went to the airport. Fahad said his final goodbyes, and the kids and I had tears in our eyes because we wouldn't see him for 2 years. After Fahad left, the house felt empty. I was deeply saddened. The kids had grown up and were busy with their studies in their rooms. I sat alone in my room when I received a call from Fahad. He told me that he had arrived safely. I felt relieved and immediately asked, "Did you give the pine nuts to your boss?" He laughed and said, "Oh dear, it's 11 p.m. My boss is at his mansion and I'm at the quarters. I'll meet him tomorrow and hand over his items. I'll also send you the money." "Why are you so worried?" I replied, "I'm not worried. I just want to know why these pine nuts are so special that your boss called you specifically to bring them from here." "Can't they get pine nuts there?" Fahad replied, "Yes, they're available there, but they're much more expensive and the quality is different. That's why my boss asked for them from Pakistan. I don't know what he'll do with them, but when I find out, I'll let you know." After a brief conversation, my husband ended the call and I lay down, finally at peace. Now I was reassured that my husband had safely reached his destination. For wives of those living abroad, it is always a relief to know that their husband has safely reached where they were supposed to be. The next morning, life resumed its usual routine: the kids' college, house cleaning, cooking, and so on. A little while later, Fahad called again, telling me that he had sent the money to my account. "Let me know when it arrives," he said. After I confirmed, we exchanged pleasantries. But as he was busy with work, we didn't talk much. Days passed in the usual manner. It had only been a month since Fahad left, when one evening, his call came in. He sounded excited and said, "I have good news for you. I want you to come and stay with me for a few days." I was stunned. "How is this possible?" I asked. "You've never called me there in all these years." He replied, "I've missed you a lot. Since I left you behind, my heart just doesn't feel at ease here. The kids are growing up, and you can leave the house with them for a while. Come spend a month with me. I'll arrange your ticket, visa, everything." While I was happy, I was also anxious. I wanted to go to my husband, but leaving my 2 growing sons behind was very difficult for me. Fahad insisted, "Call your mother over and leave the house in her hands. You can come over. I'll handle everything." Though I didn't get along well with my mother-in-law, I was left with no choice but to call her over. I handed over all the responsibilities of the house to her and began preparing for my trip. When my mother-in-law found out I was going to join my husband, her mood soured. "Your son just came back, and now you're going to spend all that money to go there? You're wasting your husband's hard-earned money." I wanted to say, "I'm not the one wasting money. You spent so many millions on your daughter's weddings, making jewelry for them." But I couldn't bring myself to say it, so I silently continued my preparations. My sons assured me that they would manage things in my absence, so I felt a little at ease. After a month, everything was set. My husband called me the day before my departure and told me, "Pack as lightly as possible and bring 10 kilos of pine nuts." I was shocked. I had already packed 15 kilos of luggage. If I added 10 kilos of pine nuts, only 5 kilos of my things would fit. But I couldn't refuse my husband's request. He had lovingly invited me, and he had even sent money for the pine nuts. So I reluctantly packed the pine nuts carefully in a plastic bag and placed them between my clothes. The next day I took my flight and reached my husband. Fahad was overjoyed to see me. It had been almost 10 years since my husband started his job abroad, but this was the first time he had called me to join him. He hugged me tightly and expressed his love. Then he took me to the bungalow where he lived. He had a decent-sized quarter with all the comforts and conveniences. When Fahad asked about the pine nuts, I took the packet out from my bag and handed it to him. He said, "I'll give this to the boss first, and then I'll come back." After some time, my husband and I sat down to talk, and I had taken the day off. He quickly grabbed the packet of pine nuts and hurried towards the bungalow. I said, "Take me with you. I want to meet your boss and madam." Fahad glanced at me and said, "They're Arabs, and you won't understand their language. But all right, I'll introduce you." My husband took me into the bungalow, and soon we were standing in front of his madam. I was shocked to find out that Fahad spoke Arabic fluently. He was talking to her in Arabic, and at the same time he handed over the packet of pine nuts to her. The moment the madam saw the packet, her eyes lit up with joy. She seemed to be thanking Fahad, and then she asked about my well-being, which Fahad translated for me. I was astonished. What could be so special about pine nuts that they were ordered in such large quantities, and the madam was so happy to see them, almost as if it were gold. The truth was, the madam herself seemed to be a walking gold mine. I had never seen a woman wear so much jewelry. Huge gold necklaces adorned her, and I could tell they were worth a fortune. We, on the other hand, could barely afford such extravagant pieces, even for special occasions. My eyes were wide as I stared at her jewels, but Fahad quickly pulled me away. He said, "What were you doing, staring at her jewelry like a beggar? What will she think?" I replied, "Well, she might not think anything, but I'm certainly thinking that I should stay here. Looks like gold is handed out for free here." I had always been fond of gold, and hearing this, Fahad laughed and said, "You'll never change, Miriam. The kids are growing up, and you still can't let go of your desires. You always have these foolish thoughts." Laughing at Fahad's teasing, I found myself smiling. The next day I made Fahad's favorite meal. Then I thought I should let the madam taste my cooking. I asked Fahad for permission, and he said, "Go ahead. She's very nice and we'll be happy to taste it. She loves Pakistani food." I went to the madam, and with much love I presented the dish to her. She joyfully placed it on her table. That evening, I received a message from her that left me stunned. She offered me a job. She wanted me to stay with her and cook meals for her. In return, she promised a good salary and would take care of my housing and passport. She was willing to sponsor me, but this wasn't possible for me. My sons were still in Pakistan, and I had left them with their grandmother for a short while. So I politely declined her offer. She said, "All right, as long as you're here, keep feeding me your food and I'll be happy to pay you for it." I agreed, knowing that I would get paid for it, and the extra income could cover our living expenses here. The next day, I started managing the madam's kitchen. Although Fahad wasn't happy about it because he had called me here for himself, I explained that this way, our travel expenses would be covered, and our savings wouldn't be impacted too much. I was doing this to ensure that my kids could get into a good university. Fahad, seeing my determination, gave me his consent, and so I began managing the madam's kitchen the very next day. I had to prepare 3 or 4 dishes together, and then I would be off for the day. As I was cooking, I noticed large containers filled with pine nuts in the kitchen. This again piqued my curiosity. Why did the boss and madam consume such a hot item in such large quantities? I had yet to meet the boss, but I had met the madam many times. However, I didn't know whom to ask as I was still unfamiliar with Arabic. I continued cooking according to my own instincts, and the madam seemed to enjoy the food I made. 10 days passed in this manner, and then one evening, just around 11 o'clock, the madam called me. I became worried, but Fahad said, "Maybe she's in the mood for something to eat. Go see." When I reached the bungalow, the madam motioned for me to make biryani. While I was preparing the biryani, the madam stood and started preparing a glass of milk. She also placed 7 pine nuts on a plate. I silently watched her, curious about who she was taking them for and why. Once the biryani was ready, I had to let the madam know. But I didn't know what to do, so I went to her room and lightly knocked on the door. The boss called out, asking me to come in. This was the first time I saw the boss, a middle-aged Arab man sitting on the bed, resting, with a glass of milk in his hand. The plate of pine nuts was no longer there. I realized then that the boss had eaten the pine nuts. I informed them in broken Arabic that the food was ready, and they understood. The boss signaled for me to leave, so I returned. Sitting with Fahad, I told him, "I saw the boss drinking milk and eating pine nuts." He smiled and said, "Your curiosity keeps growing. I'll check it out tomorrow and tell you what's going on. At least that way your investigation will end." Fahad knew me well. If I became fixated on something, I wouldn't let it go, even if it meant losing sleep over it. That's why he reassured me. And sure enough, the next day, he found out the truth. What Fahad told me left me completely stunned. He explained, "Most Arab men don't work, meaning they don't have their own businesses. They just sit around, earning from their oil wells. Or they let others run their businesses while they act as sponsors. Many Arabs here own hotels, but all the work is done by Pakistani people. They just sit back and profit. This is why so many Arab men suffer from heart diseases. Your boss has many heart problems. His cholesterol is very high, and that's why the madam feeds him pine nuts every day. Pine nuts help lower bad cholesterol and raise good cholesterol, which keeps their health in check and provides a lot of protein. Arab men don't do hard labor, so their health deteriorates internally. That's why Arab women are so concerned about their husband's well-being. I had no idea about any of this, and hearing it left me astounded. I then started observing the lives of the Arabs around me. I was shocked to see how they lived in luxury. Every home had air conditioning, and they seemed to enjoy an extravagant lifestyle. The bungalow had all kinds of amenities, and there was a horde of servants. There were even 2 women present just to cook food. Whenever we left the house, we would sit in air-conditioned cars, and when we went to the malls, they were fully air-conditioned too. You didn't even have to walk much, as there were escalators everywhere. In their lives, there was absolutely no sign of hard work or struggle. And that's where the problem lay. When a person's hands and feet don't work, their body cannot remain healthy. Instead, it becomes a breeding ground for diseases. The body becomes weak internally, and that's exactly what was happening to these Arab men. The women still managed to take care of the children, but the men didn't even do that. My husband said, "Are you finally satisfied? Have you got the answer to all your questions?" I looked at him and replied, "I am really amazed by their lives. They are so well off, so happy, and they have everything. They don't need to do any work. But now I'm thinking how harmful this doing nothing is for them. Their health is deteriorating because of it. Allah gave humans hands and feet so they could use them to work, and surely there is a purpose in that. But these Arab men have become their own enemies." My husband replied, "You always find some problem in everything. That's why you shouldn't think too much. Now your curiosity must be satisfied." He added, "I only told you all of this so that you wouldn't waste time thinking about it. You should be spending these days peacefully with me." Saying this, my husband pulled me into his arms, and I felt at peace in his embrace. I spent a wonderful month with my husband, and in that time I earned a good amount of money from cooking. I brought it back and managed to get my sons admitted to a good university. Now my children are receiving quality education, and once they have jobs, my husband will return from abroad for good. We will live a happy life together. These days, my husband often asks me to send pine nuts through some channel, and as I pack them, I think to myself how much better it would be for these Arab people if they changed their lifestyle. But I can't say this to them. However, I can say it to you. People who hire servants for everything and refuse to lift a finger to prove their high society status should know this. It harms their health. Therefore, one should always try to keep moving and doing something to keep the body active and healthy. I'd also like to mention that while pine nuts have many benefits, they are particularly useful for heart diseases. Along with medications, incorporating such foods into your routine can keep you very healthy. Unfortunately, in our country, even these beneficial foods are becoming harder to find. So even in small amounts, try to make it a part of your daily routine.